all of you. I feel like it's been a while since I've been to a mindfulness experience lately, but happy to be here and happy to answer any COVID questions that you may have. In terms of COVID news, there's not too much to report. The CDC is tracking most of their COVID infections through wastewater surveillance. And we do see an uptick. Many of you may also see it in just your normal life. More people that you know are contracting COVID. So I would say in general, there is an uptick in infections. And with that comes an uptick in deaths as well in the country, although still at a much lower number than it ever was in the pandemic. But happy to answer any questions that you may have about acute COVID or long COVID or vaccination.
Can you hear me?
I can.
This is Carolyn Sargent Burns. How are you? Thanks for being here.
Good. How are you?
Good. What is the policy for if a person had a booster in September, should they wait? Should I wait until September to have another booster when the other shots are out, or should I get a booster now?
Are you speaking about the bivalent booster? You had the
COVID. Yes, I'm sorry, COVID.
Right, but the bivalent booster is what you're speaking of, right? You had
the
Omicron. Yes. Okay. So it depends on your situation, really. If it depends on age. But other than really age and being immunocompromised, I would say wait till the fall.
Well, the age is 75.
Okay. And your last one was more than 6 months ago?
Yes.
Yeah. It's hard to speak on each individual person's situation, but I would say that based on age alone, that could be an indication to get another booster.
And then after if I get a booster now, I'll be able to get another one in 6 months, or when the other one comes out.
Technically, you want to be careful though, because there isn't enough data to really support getting boosters every 6 months. I think that the CDC basically said, you can get another booster at this point if you're over the age of 65, but I would be hesitant to really tax your immune system. I think the best way is to do other preventative techniques to not get COVID. So, wearing a mask, if you're going to be traveling, I absolutely right now would be wearing some sort of N95 mask on like a plane or train or in a crowded area. If you're somebody who's really high risk, staying out of crowded areas. If you do contract COVID, making sure that you use everything available to you to help mitigate your hospitalization risk, such as antivirals, letting your provider know immediately. That's probably more important even than the vaccine, but I would be hesitant to just kind of keep getting them every 6 months until the CDC has really come up with a decision on that, which they haven't.
So, but it would be okay to get a booster now.
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm. Especially if you haven't had active COVID in the last 6 months. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Awesome.
Ashley, did you see there may be a question or a comment in the chat window?
The age cutoff. So I think they're talking about vaccination. Yeah. So like 65, if you're considered a senior citizen. Yeah.
Cool. No other questions, y'all? Ashley, why don't you tell there may be new people here that don't know about the long COVID clinic. You want to tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So our clinic's been around for over a year now, in response to when George Washington University's hospitals clinic had closed down because they lost funding. That's when we opened our doors to accommodate them and also provide an integrative medicine approach to treating long COVID. And it's just been growing over time. We now have 2 long COVID groups that are wonderful. They're on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 5:30 to 6:30, and they're virtual. We actually closed down our Thursday group because it got too large. So now we're just doing admitting into Wednesday groups. And it's a great way if anybody here does struggle with long COVID or some sort of post-COVID effect. It's a great way to be in a group of people who are also experiencing some of the same symptoms that you may be. We talk a lot about different sort of treatment modalities that are integrative, different symptoms from pathophysiologies of what could be underlying COVID. And Dr. Kogan and myself attend them and run them. So, happy to have any of you there. Oh, look, Janet put the put the link. Oh, thank you, Anne. I appreciate the support. Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful group. I love going myself. I'm excited every time I'm there. So it's great if you guys are looking for that type of support.
And last but not least, I'm going to put, go ahead.
Yes, I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but can you talk a little bit about maybe long COVID and if vertigo is an effect of that, or?
Yeah, so vertigo absolutely can be an effect of COVID. And, usually it's related to the vestibular mechanism in your ear, but it also could be neurological as well. It's hard to say, based on the individual case, but yes, absolutely. We see many patients who have vertigo or even dizziness after COVID. Sometimes it's related to the autonomic nervous system too, with having like a dysautonomia or POTS. But yeah, absolutely, it can be.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, of course.
Okay, friends.
Seems like everybody feels whole. So that's good.
It is. So I guess we should probably wrap this up early. And let me find where Nyle is. I thought she was here. There she is.
I'll unmute myself. I bounced around because my internet crashed a couple times while trying to log on.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Actually, it's a great segue because Ashley was talking about the autonomic nervous system and POTS, and vertigo is definitely a product of autonomic nervous system dysfunction, and particularly the cranial nerves back there that run through past the inner ear canal. So what I'm going to be talking about today is specifically how trauma affects the brain and our nervous system. And I'm going to be talking about neural desensitization. And this was inspired by kind of what I'm seeing in the clinic these days. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a manual therapist. I'm an occupational therapist who specializes in fascia and connective tissue, but also the mind-body connection. So how the body stores emotion and trauma. And I look a lot at how the body affects the mind, because I think we have plenty of people looking at the reverse, right? How the mind affects the body. So I like to really center body first. I'm a big advocate of body-led healing. So everything I'm talking about today, be thinking about how the body affects the brain, but I'm mostly going to be talking about the brain. In fact, of everything I do, this is probably the most top down I'm ever going to get. But this felt important because what I'm seeing a lot of right now in my patients is kind of this thawing response where they're kind of shaking more. And this happens in my group classes where we're getting into the body and really letting the body kind of express itself. So what I'm seeing right now is that our bodies are really in this state of, there was this significant trauma in 2020, and that created kind of this frozen response, this moment in time that's frozen in our tissue. And then over the course of the past 3 years, we keep getting sick, right? Chronic long-term COVID is also starting to affect not just the trauma, but also the physical expression of trauma. So what we're ending up with now, 3 years in, is people, when you ask them to get into their bodies, they go into this kind of shaking response. And that in the somatic world, we refer to that as pronking, which is an experience that happens to animals when they've had a near-death experience. If you've ever seen like a deer kind of be chased and get away at the end, they kind of shake, like they're shaking it off at the end. And sometimes there's a little sound like a hee hee hee, like a laughter that goes with it. So I'm seeing a lot more of that in a clinical setting lately when we're trying to get into the body because the nervous system is so wired. So that's why I really want to focus on the nervous system today. So just a little bit of context, some education around the brain and the effects of trauma on the brain. For anyone who might have some background in this already, does anyone know about the amygdala and what the amygdala does? Yael, I'm sure you do. Yeah. The amygdala is our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn center. It's our survival center. It also is where a lot of our fear responses center. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells us, mobilize, you're in danger. And what it does is it actually shuts down the muscles and fires the brain from mobilization. And it does that by releasing several different enzymes and hormones, but specifically cortisol. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. So cortisol is released in response to a traumatic event. But what happens when there's long-term exposure to trauma, let's say for 3+ years, the amygdala begins to get sensitive. So now any type of stress, including good stress, because stress is meant to mobilize you into action. So even good stressors like getting married or the birth of a baby or a move or a promotion, those are, exciting, mobilizing stresses. Because the amygdala is hypersensitive from chronic repetitive stress, that cortisol now flushes the system and it causes either a state of hyperarousal or hypoarousal, and it narrows our window of tolerance, making it very difficult for us to have an adaptive response. So that's where we are at as a society right now. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about hyperarousal and the window of tolerance. I'm actually going to pull up slides. So I'm very happy my internet reconnected, or I wouldn't be able to show you any of this and you'd have to take a lot more notes. So when our window of tolerance is narrowed, we lose our adaptive response and then we go into catastrophic thinking. Everything is bad. This is awful. Everything bad happens to me. There is no hope. Is anyone kind of feeling that? Like, does this resonate 3 years in? Yeah, well, now you know why. 3 years repetitive chronic stress, the amygdala is hypersensitive. And then what also happens is because the amygdala is hypersensitive, our memory centers start to atrophy because everything starts to get processed as a current event. And the brain center known as the hypothalamus, which is our memory center, it starts to get smaller. And instead of our memories getting stored in long-term memories, they stay in the current 2-year memory banks and get replayed. What's the name of that kids movie with the different emotions, joy, sadness? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Anger. Inside Out. Thank you, Monica. Hi. So if you've seen Inside Out, do you remember the part where joy and sadness get lost in like the memory banks and they're in the file section and the workers keep sending back that gum commercial back into the front of the brain? So that's basically that they're in the hypothalamus. And there's like older files, older memories that are supposed to get stored in the back of the file cabinet of the hypothalamus. But when the amygdala is processing everything as new trauma, it keeps shooting those memories back into the front of the brain. So the hypothalamus is processing everything as 2 years or current. So your body is really re-experiencing these old traumas as new. And then the hypothalamus atrophies, which means you can't retain long-term memory. That's why people with complex traumas have blank spots in their memories, right? So if that's you, now you understand why, and maybe you can like be a little bit more compassionate and kind to yourself as a result. So that's my little kind of neurology background. I want to pull up some slides now and show you, now that you know all that, what can you do? Can everyone see this okay? Thank you. All right. So just so you can see the name of what we're talking about here, this is known as neural desensitization. And it's a method of therapy that was created by Jennifer Sweeten. And she has a book that I'll try to reference at the end here. And there's some really great tools that she recommends for helping to desensitize the brain. So what we're actually doing here is desensitizing the amygdala so that everything isn't processed as danger. And why that's important is because what that does over time is it will widen your window of tolerance. So I'm going to give you some tools today, and I want you to start playing with them and seeing which ones can be a part of your toolbox that you can use on a regular basis. If the stuff I'm saying even resonates with you, if you're like, this isn't me, but maybe you know somebody. So the window of tolerance is that space where we are available, where a stressor happens, whether it's a good stress or a not so good stress, we're able to be cool, calm, collected, and connected in that space, right? So here it says the body is in its optimal state, can access both reason and emotion. Yes, including emotion. Emotion belongs here. Emotion lives here. Emotion is important. And this is where you are mentally engaged. But what I'm seeing a lot of right now is that a lot of my patients have been in hypoarousal for a long time. And what hypoarousal looks like is a space, it's more of like a rage space or I'm like a freeze space. So anxiety space, deer in headlights space. This is often also where we experience like a shortness of breath. This is an overreactive or unclear thought space. And it's also usually where people experience some sort of digestive issues. Mind chatter tends to be very prominent in the hyper arousal space, and tension, body tension, and pain. And this is where I really want to say that I'm a big proponent of understanding how the body can actually affect behavior as well. So you can have tension and body pain already, and that can create states of hyperarousal. So those things are not mutually exclusive. The hyperarousal doesn't always cause tension and pain. It can be the other way around. In the hypoarousal states at the bottom there, that's typically where you have somebody who experiences lethargy, brain fog, depression. They tend to be more shut down. They have a lack of motivation, disassociated, avoidance. Tech addiction tends to happen with people with hypoarousal, and also GI issues. So it's important to note that you can have GI issues in both the hyper and hypoarousal states. And again, that can create those states. But what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of people who live in the hyperarousal states, as soon as they get a break from that like react space, they drop right into hypoarousal. They don't come down into the window of tolerance. They bottom out. So I've been using that term with a lot of my patients lately. They bottom out. So check in and see if maybe that's you. Like you're super productive, but as soon as you get a break, it's whoosh, you want to sleep, you're lethargic, there's brain fog, lack of motivation, that, that becomes you. And if that's the case, some of these tools might be for you. And by the way, this chart, the window of tolerance, the terminology was coined by Dan Siegel. If anyone knows Dan Siegel, he's written a ton of books. His book, Mindsight, is probably the most common one. If you're interested, I would maybe start there, and just from there, you're going to find like a ton of great resources from him. He's just very smart man. Okay, so now I've kind of given you the backstory and kind of why the buy-in. So I'm going to start to give you some tools now, and these tools are derivative of the neural desensitization techniques. The first step I want you to think about is reconnecting with the body. Again, body first, all right? If you're not starting with that foundation first, you're really just trying to like repattern something that's coming from a deeper somatic place. So that's why body first. One technique is noticing the emotions in the body. This is what's known as somatic mapping. I can guarantee you, I've done a talk in the past where I talked about how different regions of the body store different types of emotions and memories. If you want to go back through some of the recordings, you can find that one. But I can promise you that you have certain places in your body that tend to be kind of the barometer for stress, and they're your first response places. If you don't know those already, I'm curious if you do know those, feel free to type those in the chat. If you know there's a kind of a place in your body that's the first one to respond to stress, and you know that already, I'd love to hear from you. I will tell you, for me, it's the left neck. I go like, and it's that left neck region that tends to tense up first. Gut and neck. Oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. There's actually a very strong connection between neck tension and gut tension. So good on you. Left neck. Oh, other people have the left neck too. I must be resonating with y'all. That's good that you know. So if you don't already, I invite you to start to slow it down when you're in stressful places and see if you can map where in your body is responding. And if you're not sure what a response looks like, we can have a conversation outside of here. I'm always available for that. Another one really important for reconnecting to the body is set up a space for movement. I just moved and I didn't have a space for like 2 weeks. And the day that I created the space was the day that I started to move again. That is not a coincidence. So if you do not already have a space in your house, please, that is bare minimum for movement. Creating a multi-sensory environment. There's some of you here who may know better than others, but there are certain smells that you can use to elicit states of hyper or hypoarousal. So if you're feeling really anxious, there are good smells for calming, like vetiver is one. More woody smells tend to be better for calming, and then lavender is kind of the most famous one. Smells for lifting you up and creating arousal are smells like peppermint and lime. You can also have soft fabrics in your environment. Deep pressure tools like foam rollers can be really organizing and grounding. Some other resources are things like, I have a meditation on the resource page of my website, bluenyltherapy.com. Under the resource tab, under meditations, there's a meditation called Return to Self. And that meditation is a guided meditation for coming into your body. So if you've ever done a body scan before, it's kind of like that times 100. It's really good for bringing you back in. And then lastly, a meditation known as the heart connection meditation. And I won't go over it with you today, but I'll briefly mention, if I had more time, I would do it. This meditation requires you to find your pulse. So if you've never looked for your pulse before, you can take your right hand and just place it on your left wrist, your first two fingers close to the thumb, and see if you can find a pulsing sensation. Yeah, if you can't find it there, sometimes you can find it better in your neck, kind of close to the hyoid bone, the jugular here. Yeah. And this meditation really just has you feel your pulse while visualizing your heart for 5 minutes. It really couldn't be more simple than that. And I have language to kind of guide you through that. But it's really just that simple, and you do it for like 5 minutes. Is HeartMath a version of heart connection meditation? It is not. I've only done HeartMath a couple times. It's not the same as a heart connection meditation. The heart connection meditation is just feeling your pulse and visualizing your heart. My understanding of HeartMath is, oh, Yael, you'll be doing it. Oh my gosh, was that already planned? Oh, thank you. HeartMath is intentionally working to work with the heart. This is just a visualization. The whole point of this first step here, reconnecting with the body, is like, I don't want to make it hard because no anxiety here. Like, we are not trying to set you up for failure in any way. Feel your pulse, visualize your heart for 5 minutes. That's all this meditation is. Another category is regulating the stress response. So some neural desensitization techniques. The first one, and y'all can do this with me really easily right now, is place your hands over your eyes and open the back of your throat as if you're yawning. You can use the palms of your hands, or the heels of your hands rather, or you can use your fingertips. We don't want it to feel like you have to work too hard through your shoulders. So if you have shoulder injuries, you can just use your fingertips. If you don't, if it doesn't feel stressful, use the heels of your hands and open the back of your throat as if you're yawning. Doesn't that feel regulating? Yeah, opening the back of the throat, softening the jaw. Another one is contrast therapy. This is basically a fancy word for hot and cold showers. There are places you can go to where you can do hot saunas and cold plunges. I know there's one in Bethesda called Hope Floats. This elicits what's known as the diving response in your body, which instantly lowers your blood pressure and your heart rate. So it's a quick thing you can do to bring you down if you're feeling anxious, hot and cold showers. Or you can just take a wet washcloth and place it on the back of your neck or splash your face. Lastly, diaphragmatic breathing with longer out breaths. That's just a fancy word for belly breathing. I have found that when clients breathe with their bellies, allowing their bellies to rise and lower, it takes the stress and tension out of the shoulders. So instead of trying to relax the shoulders, if you just breathe for 6 counts in and for 8 counts out, feeling your belly rise and lower, that will regulate the stress response because it activates the vagus nerve that runs through the diaphragm. Lastly, strengthening the mind through affirmations. These are 2 affirmations I have here. The first one is really, really simple. I love to say it anytime I'm starting to feel like I'm not enough, or I'm feeling insecure, or I'm really like resonating with fear or something around like illness or something. I will take a deep breath in. And as I breathe out, I'll say, I am whole, healed, and complete as I am. How lovely is that? It's just like, that's it.
Healed and
And
complete.
complete as I am. And the second one, I honor myself for my strengths. I honor myself for who I am. I recognize the value of my own life. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I be at peace. And of course, you want to feel that when you say it. And so these are strengthening of the mind tools, these 2 affirmations. So my recommendation is to start to create your toolbox over time. You won't know what works for you until you try it. So go back and watch this replay, try some of these tools, feel what they do in your body, and then answer that question. How does it make you feel? It's going to do one of two things. It's either going to bring you back into that cool, calm, collected, and connected state, that window of tolerance state. Or if you do it regularly, like the movement practices, you'll notice over time it will widen your window of tolerance. So if you're interested in learning more about either the window of tolerance or neural desensitization, here's two references for you. Jennifer Sweeten is who created the neural desensitization integration therapy. She has a great book called Trauma Treatment Toolbox. And then Dan Siegel is just the pioneer of emotional resilience, in my opinion. He has great books also for children, and he's probably one of the only authors who's written on the teen brain as well. So highly recommend his stuff as well. All right, thank you all. If you have any questions, I have like another minute or two before handing it over. Yael's got some yummy stuff for us, I know it. Right?
Okay.
That was amazing. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Yael.
Nyle.
Welcome, friends.
And you had asked if I had planned to do the heart mapping. This morning, I asked Janet, what would feel good for you today? What would feel good for the group today? And she said something about moving towards joy. And so I put on these kind of outrageous earrings because they're like my props. One of my students made them for me because she said she considers me like the Earth Mama goddess. And I often feel that if we just even wear certain things, it sort of changes how we might feel. And I thought we would do the heart math. So I planned it, but just today, and it's so perfect. It really dovetails so beautifully with what you're doing. And I'll also say this because you use the R word at the very end. The windows of tolerance is also known as the zone of resiliency. So when you're in that window between, hyper and hypo, kind of like high or low, on or off, you're in your resilient place. And everything that I'm going to offer today are also sort of micro practices or small tools that you could do to sort of help you build your system's capacity to be in that space a little bit more frequently. Because getting to joy is also about discharging unnecessary stress, right? So we'll do a little bit of both. Because of that, I thought we would do several different kinds of tools. And so I want to jump in with a poetry, with a poem that I'm going to read about joy. And I'll ask you to respond. So you could either just respond. I'll ask you some questions. I'll ask you one question at the very end. Feel free to put your response in the chat, or just you could grab a scrap paper. No one's going to see what you're saying. We're not really journaling. It's more like bullet making. So this poem is actually called Ode to the Joyful Ones. So sometimes reading odes within poetry are really praise making. This poem is by Thomas Lux, and it's based on an Anglican prayer that says, "Shield your joyful ones." But there's my favorite odes. Actually, pulled out the book is Sharon Olds, who I believe is 80 years old. In this book, she has odes to things like hip replacements and the present moment. So we can really write, I've written ode to insomnia. We can write odes to anything. And I also think that that's a way of us practicing building that window of tolerance. So here's Thomas Lux's poem, Ode to the Joyful Ones. And just feel free to listen here. That they walk, even stumble among us is reason to praise them or protect them. Even the sound of a lead slug dropped on a lead plate, even that for them is music, because they bring laughter's brief amnesia. because they stand talking, taking pleasure in others with their hands on the shoulders of strangers and the shoulders of each other. Because you don't have to tell them to walk toward the light. Because if there are 2 pork chops, they will serve you the better one. Because they will give you the crutch off their backs. Because when there are 2 of them together, their shining will fill the room, because you don't have to tell them to walk toward the light. Ode to the Joyful Ones by Thomas Lux. So here's the invitation for you to jot down either on a piece of paper or in the chat. When you feel joyful, what are the things, places, people you naturally gravitate toward? With the understanding that you might not feel joyful right now. There's also no need to feel perky. You could be your authentic self. But when you feel joyful, what do you gravitate to? Or you could also answer the question of what brings you joy. And I could give you guys a few moments. I'm going to guess looking at babies, because we looked at 2 babies at the very top of the hour. Nyle, it might have been right before you signed on. There were grandbabies being shown. Yeah. So yeah, so just feel free. Young children because they're so honest, when I'm deeply conscious of how much I have. Beautiful. So I'm guessing that most of you are choosing to do this on pen and paper, which is awesome. Deep conversations with children who always have something to say. Good. So I just want to give you guys one more minute just to bullet out anything that brings you joy. Great. And then let me invite you to do this, just to look at your list, and in the same way that Nyle was offering practices that were sort of like micro practices, really small, like just covering our eyes and taking a few breaths with the throat open, really small moments. They don't have to be long retreats, immersive practices. Is there one way that you could take one of the things on your list and make sure that you get 1 to 3 minutes of that joy sometime this week? Maybe even, God forbid, every day. Can you build in a little bit more time in a place that you love, moving your body, putting on your favorite song first thing in the morning and dancing to it, whatever it might be. So just making a commitment to yourself. And again, if you feel like putting that in the chat, that's super. And if you feel like sharing it with me so that I could steal your brilliant ideas later, I would love that too. I'm always looking for micro moments of positivity, as the psychologists call them. Awesome. Okay, so I want to move us. Nyle talked about cortisol, which sometimes, we get a nice cocktail of, right? There's other hormones that are involved in either relieving negative feelings or increasing the amount of happiness or joy. And typically when we think about them, they're serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins. Serotonin is known as the feel-good hormone. Most of it starts in our gut, so you can also increase serotonin by eating right, and by doing things like mindfulness and breath work. I love that appeared in Nile's chart on both the hyper and hypo, like what to do if you want to get back into the window of tolerance or zone of resiliency. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone, and we get it like in Thomas Lux's program when they're touching the shoulders of strangers or of one another. We get it when we touch each other or give ourselves a hug. This is really a great way of using of increasing our oxytocin. Dopamine is sort of what we get when there's an uplifting feeling. And endorphins too. We mainly think about endorphins as being released during exercise, but it can also be released by certain foods, including chocolate, which is maybe why some of us eat a lot. So we're going to do very short practices that will help with all of that hormone rebalancing. And the first one that I thought of comes from the Institute for Heart Math. It's called the shift and lift technique. This is really focused on increasing serotonin. And we can also, serotonin is also increased when we do stuff for other people, which we will do in this meditation. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to find a comfortable seat. And I'm going to keep my eyes open during this. You're welcome to keep your eyes open. My invitation to you is, if you choose to keep your eyes open, don't look at the screen. There's nothing really to see here. Maybe look around the room. There might be a shell that you collected from a vacation or a photo of a loved one. Maybe there's a plant inside or outside your room. You could do a soft gaze towards that. And you're also welcome to just close the eyes. So whichever one of those feels more comfortable to you, we could go into. And I'll just first invite you to start by finding what feels good in your body today. Maybe it's just that you're having this time to sit, and you might notice your feet on the ground, your seat in your favorite chair, the breath as it's moving in your body. But often we can feel the breath a little bit more into the heart. And in fact, we could take one hand to our heart, kind of like the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Or you could take both hands to your heart, which sometimes enhances our capacity to feel this miraculous organ and how it beats effortlessly. And you could just start to let the breathing smooth out a little bit more. And imagine that breath is coming in and out of the heart area. If it helps you to visualize the heart, that's wonderful. Find a rhythm, though, that's comfortable. And then I want to invite you to activate positive feelings. Maybe it's joy, maybe it's a sense of playfulness or a sense of wonder, connection that you have. I know several people were talking about their grandbabies. So if that one, maybe your fur babies. And if it's too challenging right now to find something uplifting to connect to, no worries. Just focus on the breath coming in and out of the heart. Good. So this is sufficient, but if you'd like, join me as we go just one step further by taking these positive feelings, and we can imagine that we're radiating them out to everyone on this call, to our wider circle, to our wider community. We know that there's people in this circle who can very easily experience joy and wonder. And there's some of us who might be grieving right now, going through a hard time. And we could radiate our good energy to all of them. And as we do that, we can imagine that we're lifting the field of energy that surrounds all of us and strengthening our connections with one another. Just stay here for another couple of breaths. Good. And especially for those of us that might have our eyes closed, I always like to recommend that on an exhale, you just easily drop your chin down towards your chest, just so that you can open up your eyes at your own sweet time, kind of taking the room in. If your hands are still touching yourself, you might also just take them down. Good. Coming back to the room. 1% better? I'm looking at a few faces. Yeah. Okay, good. I almost can't help it when I do these meditations. I now naturally bring a small smile to my face. I know Nyle and others in here have talked about the vagus nerve and how that also goes right through the face. So giving good face, even if you're faking it, can help you feel better. In fact, I was going to do that a little bit later, but let's do that right now. So even though most of you have your screens off, that's okay. It is absolutely true that smiling or laughing, has anyone in here done laughter yoga before? It's totally silly. We're not going to do the whole thing, but it is totally true that smiling or laughing will actually also increase dopamine levels, and it will help you feel better. So can I just invite everyone, whether you're feeling it or not, and we can't see most of you anyway, just really do like a huge smile. And if you want to, you could start laughing just a little bit because it's kind of silly. Take a nice deep breath. Exhale through your mouth. In fact, let's go ahead, raise the arms up. Take the hands down, just exhale. You're welcome. One more time, just inhale. And exhale. Yeah, I noticed in my body just doing that, my cheeks got really red. I definitely got a little bit more energy. Oh, I love that. Good belly laughs. It is the best. It is one of the best ways of discharging stress and actually coming back into that window of tolerance. Oh, I'm glad. My husband thinks my laughter is obnoxious, so I'm glad that there's some people who appreciate it. So for the, even when we did this, for those of you that put your hands on your heart, it is contagious. For all of us, laughing is contagious. Even just putting your hands on your heart will also start to release oxytocin. And I know in here we've done a little bit of self-massage. And so I'm going to recommend we do a little bit of self-massage right now. Maybe we're feeling a little bit more open after that laughter. And so I'm going to say, just start with you very easily with your knuckles. I'm going to actually take off my rings. And we're just going to almost like draw like a hallmark heart, starting on the forehead and then going all the way down. So we go up, yeah. And then all the way around. And we'll do that a few times. You can also experiment with just doing that in a really gentle way with the fingertips. I tend to like the little bit of the deeper work. So we're, in a way, we're pulling. We could even go by the 11s, kind of pulling up and out, over and down. Let's do that a few times. Awesome. And then we could start with our head, if you don't mind getting your hair a little bit messed up. So I'm just going to take my fingertips. I'm going to start right in the center, and I'm just going to pull out. And you could do that on your forehead. You could do that on the crown of your head. Some people don't really like the crown touched. And you could do that all along the back of the neck as well. And we can also come down maybe right by where the cervical spine is and just pull out a little bit here. Releasing all the way down to the shoulders. You could go up. So a lot of times we're stiff-necked, and because now you know I like poetry and metaphors, stiff-necked was often used to describe those of us that were not open, could not easily find our joy. We're a little bit more rigid, not just physically, but also psycho-spiritually. Good. And then we're just going to start to draw. I hope you guys can see me okay. Just going to start to draw some circles. You could start by sort of the base of the neck or the trapezius, upper trapezius, and then just go right along the neck up towards the skull. If there's any points you feel kind of by the sides of the neck, these huge earrings are blocking most of you, but you get the idea. And for a lot of us, we're extra tight right here by the occipital ridge. So feel free to draw those circles there, or you could also dig in with your thumbs. Good. And then just release here. Maybe close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. If not, soft gaze anywhere that makes sense. And just notice how you're feeling. Beautiful. So even just a couple of minutes of self-massage. We are somehow very low on time, but I do want to do one last thing with you because the endorphins are often also released through movement. So the only thing I'd like to do is 1 minute of shaking. So we're going to stand up before we say goodbye. Actually, you don't even have to stand up. You know, you could stay seated if you want and just like shake out an arm or a leg. I really like to do like the full body shaking. And I like to tell my students, and there's a few folks who come to my classes who are in the room. It's good to see you guys. I always like to say, if you close your eyes, you become invisible and nobody can see how silly you look. It's a little bit like the laughing. So just take a moment. You could shake and sway. You can also just keep your feet where they are and move the knees a lot so that you can feel the flesh on the back body shaking. Good. And then let's just pause. If you're standing up, it might feel good to take your hands to your body, maybe the lower belly or the chest. And again, let's just come back to a good feeling, a feeling of gratitude for this circle, for Janet, who is our fearless coordinator week after week. Maybe radiating some of our positive energy to one another. And then whenever you're ready, just coming back into the room. I'm sorry that that was a little bit abbreviated, but I hope you had a good time.
The shaking is always the best for me. And some mornings when I remember to do it, I do it. Roll out of bed and just start shaking everything. All right, friends. Just wanted to remind you that we will not be meeting next week because it is 4th of July weekend. So we will be back on July 7th. I hope everyone enjoyed Nyle and Yael, and I hope you have a beautiful weekend.
Thank you all
You
so
too.
much. Beaming love to you, Janet.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.